Is there anything that you do in terms of your introduction? You just want me to start going?
No, as far as that goes, I want to thank everybody for coming to the New Jersey PowerShell meeting. Tonight's guest is Jeffrey Hicks, and he's going to be doing a presentation called On the Job. So, Jeffrey, please take it over. I will handle any questions in the chat room as they come in. And
okay.
Right.
If you have a question, put it in, and I'll try to answer it as they come along. That's fine. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for either sticking around, for those of you here on site, or coming back and getting online. Tonight I want to talk about PowerShell Scheduled Jobs. This is something that I use a lot. I'm not so sure other people take advantage of it, and I don't know if that's because they don't fully understand it. There are some gotchas you got to be aware of. I'm going to cover those. But with a PowerShell scheduled job, you get the benefit of all the cool stuff you can do with PowerShell, plus the benefit of running it as like basically a scheduled task. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. Real quickly, for those of you who don't know who I am a longtime PowerShell MVP. I work today primarily in the PowerShell space, although my background is in Microsoft servers and infrastructure. But I do a lot of stuff on PowerShell writing. I write for Petri.com, where I am a contributing editor to a lot of the PowerShell content. I do training, I consult, I mentor, I speak at conferences, I write books, I write courseware for Pluralsight. I blog quite a bit. I have my blog link there, and I'm very active on Twitter. So if you were to do the social media thing, which I encourage you to do, you can follow me, follow me there. Everything I'm going to show you tonight, including my slides such as they are, I will share with our sponsor, and he can share them on the site, however you share your material. Okay, so don't feel you have to take lots of notes. You will have all of my examples. A lot of my examples are written kind of as one-liners. That is just more for the sake of expediency. Focus more on the results that I end up with, not necessarily on the language or how I may have used them. And I'm running everything in PowerShell version 4. This feature, scheduled jobs, was introduced in PowerShell version 3. So as long as you're running version 3 or later, pretty much everything I'm going to show you should work. So scheduled jobs is a blend of a standard background job that we have in PowerShell and scheduled tasks. So you can take, that's basically the best of both worlds. These commandlets that we use for scheduled jobs are packaged in the PS scheduled job module. In PowerShell 3, you kind of had to manually import that module in order to take advantage of some of the features. Now in version 4, it's just automatically there. But I do want you to know that that module exists, and that's where all these things come from. You can create scheduled jobs that run as a one-time task, as a one-off. Let's say I got a problem, and I want to run some command at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to come back, but I only need it just tonight. So you could create a PowerShell scheduled job and have it kick off at 2 a.m., and then in the morning, you can retrieve your job results just like you would any other job. You can use the PowerShell commands that you would normally have run at 2 a.m., but you can basically turn them into a scheduled task really easily. Or you can do something on a regular basis. I have a number of scheduled jobs that go out and query all my test servers and check for disk space. Since I run Hyper-V, I have a special Hyper-V reporting script that tells me basically the health of my Hyper-V server and all the virtual machines on it. I run that weekly. So I have all these tools that give me the information that I need. In my case, I'm using scheduled jobs more as a reporting tool. You could certainly use scheduled jobs to do things. You may have a mission-critical server, and once a month, I need to restart a service. But I need to restart it off hours. No problem. Your script is going to be one line, restart service. Sure, if you want to put in some features, will log it and all that other stuff you can. Schedule it to run on the last day of the month at 4 a.m. You're good to go. You don't have to come in. You don't have to make the intern come in. So the way that we work with scheduled jobs, we have to create a task definition. The PowerShell scheduled job that you create runs regardless of whether PowerShell is even running. So you can create the scheduled job and close PowerShell. You can potentially even log off of Windows, depending on how you have set up your job. This works because the job definition is written to disk, and it stores it in this path under your app data folder, blah, 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 PowerShell scheduled job scheduling. And what you'll end up with is an XML definition of your job, the thing that you want to run. And then the task scheduler is configured to go and pull that configuration, load it into a PowerShell session. It spins up a new PowerShell session, loads that job definition, does it, and then writes the results back to your job, as well as any history that you may configure in the task scheduler. Again, these history and the results are saved to disk. So when you come in the morning and you get job, you should see the job results. There's the path, so you get a file time-stamped so you can tell which one goes with what. We have a series of commandlets for creating and managing these scheduled jobs. Once the job is created, once it's run, you can manage those job results like you would any other job. So you use receive job, remove job. I'll show you how you can use start job if you want to kick off a scheduled job. So you use the same commands that you've used all along. Now, scheduled jobs are created locally. You could conceivably use PowerShell remoting to schedule jobs to run on other machines. I'm going to talk about credentials in a second, so you got to be, and that's where things can trip you up. You got to think about what it is that you want to do with the scheduled job. A lot of the stuff you can do from your desktop. So if you're acquiring remote machines, you don't have to have that run on a remote machine, unless it's because even the restarting the service. I can easily restart a service on a remote machine from my machine. So that scheduled job can actually live on my machine. It doesn't have to live on the server. Some people will set up a kind of a central management server, kind of like a jump server maybe in some cases, and all of their managed scripts, their scheduled jobs, run from there and goes out and talks to all the servers. So personally, if I don't have to set it up on the server, I'm probably going to try to avoid that. I also then don't have to worry about someone sneaking in and modifying the script or whatever that job might be running. And when it executes, it's executing something that I'm not expecting. I feel a little more control if it's my computer. But they do create locally, because there's no parameter for the job commands I'm going to show you for dash computer name. So you can use remoting though for everything else. Credentials will trip you up. When you create a job, by default, it will use your current credentials. There are provisions to specify, I want this to run under different credentials. Most times that will work. There's one situation where there's a bug and that won't work, and I'll get to that. So the process. Now I'm going to walk through this kind of as a manual, step-by-step. You can easily do all this as one command. You could build a script to do this, but it's not one of those things where I'm creating the same job over and over again. Although you could, if you want the same job to run on all your machines, someone might write a script to create all these things and then just share it, that's fine. So we're going to create a trigger. When do I want this script, this command, to execute? And there's a command called new job trigger we're going to look at. We then define an action that action can either be a script or a script block. The script block can be as many PowerShell commands as you want to execute. The same things that you would type interactively in a shell. We then create the scheduled job, we register it with the task scheduler. Register scheduled job is the name of the commandlet. You give it a name, the trigger, the action, a few other optional parameters we're going to get to. You can specify here alternate credentials, or if you're even using your credentials and your command, whatever you want to run, scheduled, needs to connect to the network, to say connect to a file share or to another server, you will need to specify your credentials and re-enter your password to get the same little dialog box like you do with get credential, so that the task scheduler has the checkbox for run with saved credentials. Because if you don't run with saved credentials, you can't access network resources. So if all you're doing is just something locally on your box, you don't have to use credentials. But if you're accessing the network, you do need to use credentials, even if they're your own. Once the scheduled job is created, there are commandlets. You can enable it, disable it, you can modify it. You could conceivably just open up Task Scheduler and modify the job that way. I think you're better off trying to, if you create it in PowerShell, I think you should manage it in PowerShell. Unless you're trying to troubleshoot something, which gets the Task Scheduler can come in handy. You can launch scheduled jobs with Start Job, or you can go to the Task Scheduler and manually kick it off. So here is, and I've got some other examples of what I'm going to go through. I'm going to create a new job trigger, save it to a variable $T. So whatever it is I'm going to do is going to happen daily at 6 a.m. And my script block, I'm going to get the processes on my machine, sort them by working set in descending order, select the top 10, create an XML file, and put it in my work directory, and it's going to have basically today's date as the file name. So that's going to run daily at 6 a.m. I then register, so my job's going to be called top processes, basically working set. And that's how easy it is. That's 3 lines. It could actually be written as 1 line, and for script block and trigger, you could just put in parentheses those other commands. I like it nice, separate steps. I could wait until 6 a.m. for it to run, or you can start the job. Now, in PowerShell in version 3, they introduced this new parameter, definition name. That is the name that you gave your scheduled job. In my case, it's top WS processes, and I believe you can use wildcards so you don't have to type everything. You can call the job whatever you want. If you have spaces, so then you need to enclose it in quotes. So whether you make it all one word with dashes or underscores, that's really up to you. In PowerShell 3, in order for that to work, you kind of needed to import that scheduled job module. Now you don't. So that's the basic. That's how easy it is. Also, in addition to a script block, there's a parameter for a file path. So you can specify a script that's on your machine and have that execute, like you can with invoke command. But you can fine-tune your scheduled job. You know, if you've ever created a scheduled task manually, there are a number of options you can set, such as I want to wait to run if your machine's going to go to sleep, start of going on batteries if that's the sort of thing. The big ones for me that I pay attention to are the run elevated and run without network. So I can, if I want, for example, if I know that my scheduled job has to access the network. If the network is not available, then don't run. I'm going to want to set this run without network to false. Because if that's set to false, then no. Let me get this right here. If run without network, yeah, so run without network true means I'll run whether I can connect to the network or not. If I set it to false, then I won't run unless I can connect to the network. Did I get that right? It's like double negatives. Making my head hurt. So these are options, scheduled job options that you can configure. Now there's a commandlet, I'm going to walk through this, that you can use to, when you create your job, say, I want to add these optional features to my job. I'll show you how we do that. Once the job has run, either through the task scheduler or you've manually kicked it off, you're going to get job results, like you would any other background job. You can manually start them, enable it, and disable. You can also unregister the scheduled job if you want to get rid of it. However, be aware that if you unregister a scheduled job, which deletes it from the task scheduler, it also deletes all of the file components that are in your app directory, app data directory. So any results, even if you have not received them, are gone. So if you unregister a scheduled job, make sure you have received any job results that you might need. Most of the time, with my scheduled jobs, I never go back and look and receive any of the results, because either it's because something that's just going to show up in my mailbox, I mail myself a lot of stuff, or I just know it's going to work. If it doesn't work, well, that's no big deal. But if it is something that you will want to get results, make sure you get results of the job before you unregister the scheduled job, because that will delete everything. So let's just get into the demos. Any questions so far? Any questions in the chat?
Not yet, no.
Everyone's still awake?
Yep.
All right, as I said, I'll share this little demo script here. This has to be run in an elevated session, these commands. Don't confuse the stuff that I'm talking about tonight with the Scheduled Tasks module that was also introduced in Windows 8. That's for actually working with all of the task scheduler. That's completely separate from what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to look at the commands in the PS Scheduled Job module. So these are all the things, we're not going to look at every single commandlet, but these are the commands that you would use to work with scheduled jobs. And let's say, you know what, I want to create a new job trigger. So you can look at help. I'm going to trust you will read the help and look at the examples if you have how this all works. So I'm going to create a new job trigger to run daily at 8 a.m. PowerShell, even though this at is a date time, PowerShell is smart enough to know that this will be treated as a date time. So let's create that trigger. So that is the type of object. It's just an object here in PowerShell. It's not doing anything, just something that I've defined. All right, so I'm going to create a scheduled job that I want to go out and check the status of some services on my domain controllers in my test domain. So I'm going to give eventually, this is going to be called domain controller service check. This is going to be the name of my scheduled job. I'm going to save that to a variable. So the action that I want to do is this script block here. Within the script block, I'm defining an array of services, and I'm going to get those services on my 3 domain controllers, sort the result by machine name, and then to make a nice formatted table. Now, what I recommend you do, so there is $action. Test your, whatever it is you're going to schedule, if you can, test it interactively. So I can use the ampersand, which is the invoke operator, and say invoke $action. And that's the result then so it all works, and I can see what I'm supposed to get. So my table is grouped by computer name, and I can see the status of the services, whether they're running or stopped. Okay. No one's good on that? All right, so now I know that my action works. That does require the network, so I'm going to create a job option using new scheduled job option to require the network. So that set the require network, run without network, it set that to false, because I have to have it. The rest of these items I really don't care too much about. Now, the last step is just to create the scheduled job. Register scheduled job is the commandlet name. You can see how we can do that. So you can specify a script block, or you can specify the path to a file, an actual PS1 script. If you want to customize the behavior, you can pass arguments, like you can with invoke command or start job. If you want this to run with different credentials, or even if it's your own credential, there is a dash credential parameter you can use. If you need to import a module or do something funky to set up your environment, there is an initialization script parameter. There is also now an option for run now. So you can create the register the scheduled job and have it immediately kick off. Sometimes that's helpful. When you create a job and it runs, it will maintain at the default, I think it's 32 job results. Sometimes that's just too many. Let's do this. Let me bring up help for register scheduled job. I want to look at something here. Oh, F1. Max results. All right, so the default value, when you run a scheduled job, PowerShell will keep, by default, the 32 times that job ran. The 33rd time, it overwrites the oldest one. Most of the time, you don't probably really want that, especially if you have lots of scheduled jobs, because then when you go to run get job, you're going to see all of those results. So trying to sift through that can be kind of tedious. So you may also want to specify basically how much history do you want to maintain. So if the default is 32, you can set that to whatever you want. Maybe it's just one. Maybe all you care about is just show me the last time that it ran. If I'm doing something that's only running weekly, I typically keep like 4 a month's worth of history. But that's up to you. So in my case, I'm just going to create my scheduled job, and I'm going to use a hash table parameter, so I'm going to splat just to make it a little bit easier to read. So register scheduled job, the name parameter, there's my name. I could have, in fact, I probably should, because I defined the variable. Let's use it, $name. The script block, there's my action. The trigger is that trigger object I created, and my scheduled job option. So this param hash, let's just define that, show you what that looks like. All right. So those are my parameters that I'm going to basically throw at register scheduled job. And it's done. I just created that new scheduled job. I can run get scheduled job, specify the name, and see the result. That is a little hard to see all the details. Let's pipe this to format list. Because actually format list also shows me all of the information. So there's the command. You can see what I'm running. My trigger is a nested object. It would be like that dollar trigger I showed you before. There's my execution history length. I probably should have change that, but I didn't. This is this PS execution path and arc. This is what actually is running in scheduled task, which I'm going to show you in just a second. We'll come back to that. All of this data is in this path here. I'm just going to create a variable $job path so I don't have to type all of that. Now, I've got lots of other scheduled jobs, but you can see the format here where I've got the name of the job. Here's the job definition. These are all of the results that I've gotten for this particular scheduled job. There's a directory for each one, and then within each directory is the results XML file. So this is all of my data, and this is what's all persisted to disk. The job itself is in the task scheduler. Come on here to Microsoft, Windows, PowerShell, Scheduled Jobs. So there is my domain controller's service check that I just created. Notice here that, oh, this is going to fail if I run it, right? Because look, this is saying do not store password. The task will only have access to local resources. So I bet if I come back here and try to execute it, that it is going to fail. So let's try start scheduled job. Oh, start job, sorry. Definition name, what did I call this? Oh, you know what, I saved my variable $name. All right, so now I've kicked off that job, so now I don't want to wait for it to run. Get job 11. It completed. Receive the job just like you would any other job. Now watch this work and make me a liar. Let's keep the results. And that worked. So in this particular case, the fact that this is set to not access local resources didn't really seem to mind. Sometimes it will. And in those cases, if you're not getting results and you're querying network resources and you need to authenticate, that's when you would create the credential parameter and include that credential. Even if it's for yourself, you just re-enter it. So it's interesting that that did not require me to authenticate. However, let's try this one more time here, because that works fine within PowerShell starting that job. Normally, the task scheduler, I don't even have to have PowerShell running. The task scheduler is going to come around and go, oh, it's 8 a.m., it's time to start a job. Actually, let me do this. Let me refresh this, because there is a little, because as far as the task scheduler is concerned, it has never run this job, even though I manually ran it in PowerShell. So now let's try running this directly in the task scheduler. You can see that it's running, and let's see what happens. If we were to look here, in fact, while that's running, we come here and go to properties. So you can see what it's running. There's my trigger. Here's the actions. This is that same information that we saw there in the job. So this is running PowerShell, but this will not, I think they fixed this in version 4. When it loads PowerShell, it hides the window, so you don't even know it's running. Oh no, this does just have no logo, but this will load your profile. If you don't want your profile loaded for whatever reason, then you can include the -no profile parameter for PowerShell that XC command line tool. Condition settings, history, basically the same stuff you would normally see in a scheduled task, except it's going to load a PowerShell, it's going to kick up a PowerShell session, load the PowerShell definition of the job, run it, save the results, all of that. So let's refresh this. That finished. Says that it completed successfully. Huh, okay. Didn't give me an error. Now, the job itself, as far as the task schedule is concerned, the job completed. Whether it got me anything, I don't know. The task scheduler really has no way of knowing if the PowerShell commands I tried to run did anything, but as far as the task schedule is concerned, it was able to kick off PowerShell, load the job commands, and do its thing. So let's come back here to PowerShell, and let's do get job. So you can see I've got lots of scheduled jobs, and here are all of my results. So there's job 11, that domain controller. There's job 42. That's the one that probably just ran. Nuts. I need an alias 8 for star. That would make my life so much easier. All right, so look at the begin time, end time, 7:01. That's the time when I manually just kicked that off. It completed. Let's receive I before E, except after C.
Cheater.
Yeah, well, except it's not is our GB. Make me type it. What's my number? 42. Well, that sort of worked. That did not give me the results for all of the computers, did it? It only gave me results for one, even though it said it completed. So I bet if I were to go back here and modify the credential, modify this, store the password, click OK, it'll prompt me. This is where, now remember those computers are also not in my domain because I'm in a standalone machine. Let's try running this again here. This is more of a proof of concept anyway, right? When you create a job, a scheduled job, you can only see, when you run get job, you can only see the jobs that you created with your credential. So if you create a job, register a job, and use different credentials, and then you go back to your computer and do get job, you won't see that job unless you're running PowerShell under those credentials that you created that job. You follow that? Remember, because that job definition is in your app data folder. Let's see, this is finally finished. All right, so that's finished. Come back here to PowerShell. Get job. All right, so there's 43. So in my particular case, and it's probably because of my networking setup and permissions, because I'm not in a domain, doesn't like, if for some reason it's not retrieving the other computers. So it'd be something I would want to troubleshoot. In the domain environment, it would probably work better. The scheduled job object itself, as I showed you, it's a pretty rich thing. You can just select all of the properties, and if you want to modify them, you can. There are commandlets. Say, hey, show me the trigger for a particular job, because that's not necessarily easy to see here. All you see is 1, 2, and you can have multiple triggers per job. I've never found a need for that myself, but you can, just like you can anything else. The job options, if you want to see what is set up. If you want to modify the job options, maybe what I need to do is run the job option and include -run elevated. Maybe that's my problem. I really don't know, to be honest. So I'm going to run get scheduled job option. So it's going to get that job option from that particular scheduled job. Run it to pipe it to set scheduled job. This is one line. Maybe I should do that. Doesn't write anything to the pipeline unless you use -pass-through. And I just want to show the new value. All right, so now that is set to true. And run without network is set to false. I now have just basically modified that job option. So if I come back here, so now it's set to true. You can also modify the trigger. Let's say that I want to, instead of my trigger happening daily at 8 a.m., I want it to run at noon. And I want it to run every hour. I want to run once an hour after noon. So I'm going to get that job trigger. Again, this is a one-line command. Set the job trigger and specify a repetition interval. In this particular case, does not work for a daily job trigger type. We'd have to look at the help and the repetition interval parameter. That's through, no, repetition interval. So that looks like running at a specific hours. This is not like the daily job. So that's fine. We're going to show you how to start it, get the job results, receive the job, shows you all the files written to disk. It's really pretty easy. If you decide you want to disable a job temporarily, this does support -what if. So now I've just disabled, say, I got to figure out what's going on here. So I'm going to do some testing. I don't want to be running on a scheduled basis, so you can temporarily disable it. And then when you're done, you can go and enable it. Does support what if. If you are completely finished, you can unregister it. Again, remember, if you do that, that will delete all of the history, all of those jobs. So even if I were to, let me come over here to this PowerShell window. I can pretend I open up a brand new PowerShell session. And it's going to load my profile, does some things. That's why it's taking a bit here. All right. Even in a total new session, here are my get job. Now the job ID numbers might change, because that depends on how PowerShell is reading the files from disk, but I can see at least 2 times I can see the 2 different start times, so then I can decide which job I want to get results from. And of course, I've got to use keep, so now that's totally toast. I'll have to come back and troubleshoot my job here. But I'm going to leave it there for the time being. Questions over any of that? what I recommend you do, instead of using a action or script block like I did, because if I have to go back and modify and tweak that script block in some way, I kind of have to go back and modify and touch the whole job. What I've started doing, what I kind of recommend to people, is to use a script. So I have, for example, here's one of my scheduled jobs that I run that does a daily boot. What did I call it that? Oh, a daily boot backup. I run on my laptop here. I'm basically running Windows 8, but I run it all, or 8.1, all from a VHD. And I have a scheduled job that every night, it copies the VHD to an external drive. So worst case, if I screw something up or something totally burns, I have my entire computer on a VHD that I can just copy someplace else. So I just have a script here called backup boot VHD.ps1. When I created the job, I specified the file path to this script. If I decide, oh, I need to fix a bug or something, all I have to do is just come in and modify the script. My scheduled job, unless I want to change the time, I can leave alone. Because that's not going to do anything with the script until it goes to run it the next time. So I had this working once, worked just fine. I looked at it, just the other day, actually. I thought, you know what? I think I need to add a few things to it to add some fault tolerance, some logic, some error handling. And so I went in and modified the script, and since then, I think it has run, which I could probably test that. Get job, daily boot. I've got several daily. So I want 17. So let's look and see. All right, so that ran at 1 a.m. If your task or script doesn't write anything to the pipeline, then when you do receive a job, you won't get anything. Not an error, you just didn't tell PowerShell to give you a result. So in my case, I made sure that after the file is copied, I'm using -pass-through, so I get a result back. I don't have to, but I decided to do that. So using a script makes this much easier to maintain or to update or revise as opposed to using a script block. Script blocks, like I did here, are fine for quick and dirty. I need to run something, but I don't want to run it right now. I want to run it later. Maybe not something that you want to do on an ongoing basis. In that case, I would use a script file. I do have another script, a function. Oh. What do I do with that? Because you might have multiple, or you will have multiple jobs like I do here, sometimes I wanted to know, show me the last result for each of my jobs. So I wrote a function, which I apparently called something else. Called get scheduled job result, which will by default give me, this is something I wrote a couple years ago, by default give me the newest or last job result for each of my scheduled jobs. And actually did some customization, building custom type formats and extensions, and an alias called LJR, last job run. So if I run and load this, and run last job run, now at a glance, and maybe let's send this out grid view. Now at a glance, I can look at live scheduled jobs, see when they completed, how long they took, and when they started and ended, and I get the job ID. So if I want to retrieve the results of one of them, I can say, oh yeah, let me check the job 36, my email backup. So I can then come in here to receive job 36, -keep. And that failed because that tried to run probably with something not hooked up. Actually, that is an old job that I need to update, because that is trying to back up to a drive that's on a different computer. I moved some jobs around when I moved over to this computer. So I got to fix that. Scripts make things much easier. All right, let's see what other slides I have here. Some this and that. As I said, use scripts instead of script blocks. I think it'll make things easier for you. And certainly test everything interactively first, then test like I did, both by starting the job manually in PowerShell, as well as in the task scheduler. Because you may get different results, as you saw there, and then you got to figure, okay, what's not working. I recommend setting the maximum history. Unless you want 32 results or more, you can set it higher, I suppose, if you wanted. Set something that's a little more reasonable, something that is easier to manage. Specify credentials if you are accessing network resources, even if they're your own credentials, that's fine. All right, here's the one you got to watch out for. And this is a weird one. I think I have this right. If you create a scheduled job, PowerShell scheduled job, and configure to run weekly, and you use alternate credentials, it won't run. It's a known bug, it's filed on Connect, Snover knows about it, it's something to do with permissions and accessing that XML file. As to why something's different between a weekly and a daily, don't know. So if you're trying to run something weekly and you get a message in the task scheduler like this operation terminated by user or something, that's what this bug is. That's what it looks like. Weekly, alternate credentials is the problem. As long as you're doing stuff under your credentials, you should not have an issue. I run weekly tasks under my credentials, no problem. Got to watch out for that one. And you can only get, again, scheduled jobs that you created. So if you have a server and 2 people have set up scheduled jobs, you can't see their scheduled jobs unless you go into the task scheduler. PowerShell will only show you the ones that it can read under your app data directory. A little this and that. It's really that easy. Questions? Anything in the chat room? Anyone awake?
Everybody's awake and no questions in the chat room at this point.
I think I'm not sure if this is a stupid question or not. But
No, it's stupid if you don't ask it.
Okay. So you create a job and you give it credentials. And then 2 weeks later, you have to change your password because we have a password policy.
Right. You got to change the credentials in your job.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like you would if it was a scheduled task, having nothing to do with PowerShell. Yeah, you'd have to do that.
Okay.
So there's no environment or way to integrate Active Directory in some capacity so that it picks up on that change?
Not unless you have some third-party tool that ties into the task scheduler.
Right.
Windows doesn't do that. All we've done with a PowerShell scheduled job is take the benefit of leveraging everything you know about PowerShell and making it easy to create a scheduled task.
Yeah.
You could create all of that manually yourself. You could say, I want to create a scheduled task, and I want it to run PowerShell.exe, the same things that you would get, if you were in a CMD shell, because you can run PowerShell, or I'll even go to the CMD. All right, so now I'm in the DOS type shell. You know that you can run PowerShell right from DOS, or even from within PowerShell if you want to start a nested PowerShell session. So you can run PowerShell.exe, no profile, no logo, no interactive window style, specify the path to your script. You could do that manually yourself. Set the credentials, all the options, and do it manually in the task scheduler. Nothing wrong with that. The scheduled job commands allow you to do that all from PowerShell and then manage all the results in PowerShell.
Okay.
So if you have to change credentials, you've got to change credentials. There's nothing different there about that.
Jeff, in an enterprise, where do you see the value for this? Like if I'm an admin on one server and I need to do my stuff, that's fine. If I'm managing a team and I'm writing jobs and people need to see this, how can this be done?
Okay, so this really comes down to I would say the same thing as it comes when you're writing a script for someone or a function. Who's going to use this and what are they trying to get out of it? So for me, I'll talk about how I came up with this. I've got Hyper-V running. Now, my Hyper-V box is this little gigabyte bricks here. It runs completely headless. I have no idea really what it's doing unless I use the Hyper-V commands. Not sitting up on a monitor, nothing for me to see. So it's very important that I know, at least once a week, how's he doing? So I have a scheduled job that runs a script, which I could run manually, but that would mean me remembering to do it and then type it all out, and I'm too lazy. I want the ease, so I open up my email Monday morning, I can look at the health report. Because my script runs, it creates the HTML report, and it emails it to myself. Now, I could just as easily, so say I'm on a team, I could just as easily create that report and have it emailed to everyone on the team, or post it to an intranet server. Now, where that job runs, that's really up to you. It doesn't have to run everywhere. It just needs to run in one spot where I can talk to all my Hyper-V servers, or SQL servers, or file servers, or whatever it is that you want to manage. So, I guess the answer to your question really is, you can do things for you to make your job easier. Let's say you have because you probably have some standard stuff that's assigned you to do on a daily or weekly basis, right? And right now, maybe you're doing that manually, and you're hoping to find some PowerShell way to do that. Ideally, it might even be something that doesn't as long as it gets done, it doesn't really matter that you type it interactively. So, do you have something like that that you have to do?
Something that I do, I wasn't able to use the get scheduled job, but I download an XML file from
the website, right.
And I parse it through what we want to see, then I convert it to HTML, and then send it to myself.
Okay, and right now that's a manual process, sort of.
Well, I created a task in Task Scheduler,
you
know
did?
with PowerShell.
Oh, right, okay. Right, so even before you would do that, though, so instead of him having to come in daily, weekly, and typing out those commands, he can set that up to run as a scheduled job, or manually like you just did in Task Scheduler.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, it's just a matter of where you create it.
Yeah.
And PowerShell does its thing. He no longer is completely hands-off. Now, the nice thing is, if you've done it as a script, and let's say you're emailing to yourself, you could want to modify the script to have it emailed to someone else when you go on vacation, or have it emailed probably to multiple people at the same time. Now, even if he's out sick, as long as whatever computer is that job is scheduled on is up and running, you don't have to be logged in, it will execute. Completely hands-free now. Set it and forget it. He doesn't have to worry. He doesn't have to come in. He can be stuck in traffic, stuck at home because of a snowstorm, and that will still get done. And the people who might be relying on the information who did make it in, they can keep going with their work. So it takes some of the human, I'm going to say it takes a human element out of it, but that's kind of drudgery in some ways, right? Takes away the drudge work, the grunt work that we have to do, frees them up to do more interesting work. That's where PowerShell really comes in handy, and having something scheduled just removes it one more step from your plate. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, I mean, what I was trying to get at is you also have to figure out how you want to display or, end up exporting out the results of your job.
And that's only if, right, so exporting or getting the results of your job, that's really if you even need results. Whatever it is that you're doing, maybe does nothing that returns any job results, like the emailing stuff. If I get the report in my email, I know it worked. I never have to go back and get any job results. In fact, I don't think those jobs even write anything to the pipeline. So I could probably set a maximum job count to really low because there's nothing there for me to see anyway. Your job does not have to return anything. But you're right, if it does, yes, then you need to add in a step to manually retrieve that result. But that's kind of a separate issue as to what you're going to do with the data. That's what I said. Who's going to use it? How are they going to use it?
Right.
You're thinking. Question?
No, I just wanted to let you know we have a question from Otto, and this is in regard to credentials. He says, I schedule jobs via task scheduler for now on more than 2,000 servers. Changing credentials every 60 days is not feasible. Why not use system?
I don't know if, using system depends on the task. So it works fine if all you're going to do is something that's running locally on that machine, yeah, that probably would work. But if you're doing something where I need to connect to a remote machine, or let's say you're running something, you're going to copy some files to a file share for your scheduled task, or write to a SQL database. Now I have to configure the permissions on that resource to allow system to connect, or that makes it much more complicated. It should be easier, and I'll have to look into this, to change the credentials using PowerShell. There's a whole set of command lists for managing scheduled tasks, which I'm not covering tonight. So if you're just talking about the task scheduler, there should be command lists to allow you to get the task and to modify it and specify a new credential. So the fact it's 2,000, it may take a little bit of time, but does not require you to go through a GUI. That's a good question. I'm going to have to remember that and work on that as a Petri article. That's a good idea, good content.
Well, the other thing that we do is we run service accounts. So basically, their passwords get changed, but not as often as a user's account is. You can't log in with them. They're only there to authenticate. Right, they're not interactive ones. So if somebody does get on there, they can't do anything with it really except run jobs, which means they're really into our environment at that point.
Yeah, so for a PowerShell scheduled job, personally, I think they're intended to be running under like your credential. Because it's something that instead of you having to come in every morning at 6 a.m. and do something, the task schedule will do it in your place. So it's a little bit different. It's not quite like a service. It's not quite like other scheduled tasks that that Microsoft has to do all sorts of things, or Google Update or any of that, where, yeah, that might run under system or a service account. These are things that really are admin tasks, ideally, and so they're going to use an admin credential. And yeah, eventually you have to change it, but it shouldn't be that difficult. You should just be able to specify a new credential. There was a set scheduled job commandlet that I believe, let's look here.
Are these scheduled jobs actually running as an interactive type thing?
No.
Okay, so they are running as more of a system level
Well,
type, non-interactive.
they're designed, I mean, you can make them interactive,
Yeah.
but by
No,
default,
they're
they're running PowerShell in a non-interactive.
Okay.
That way, if you're working, you don't have stuff popping up in your face. So set scheduled job. Let's see, does this have a credential?
Good.
Yeah. So set scheduled job has a credential parameter.
Reference the database.
So I could do get scheduled job, whatever it is, pipe it to set scheduled job and specify the new credential. Let me see if there's an example in here. Choose the jobs. No, they don't have an example. But for a PowerShell scheduled job, so if I have to change the credential, I just do get scheduled job, whatever the jobs are with the credential I need to change, pipe to set scheduled job, dash credential, put in a new credential, and I'm done.
That has to be a scheduled job, it's a new credential.
I'm assuming you know what your new credential
Before
is.
your ones are, before the one that's going to expires? I mean, at some point, if all of your credentials are expiring every 30, 60 days, then some process is going out there to change these credentials. It's going to happen.
It's no different than what you'd have now. If you create a scheduled task running under your credentials. At some point, that password will change. If you want your scheduled task to work, assuming it's using your credentials, you're going to have to go in and update that scheduled task, which is what Otto was talking about for his 2,000 scheduled tasks.
Yeah, he followed up, but he said that it's only local, the system works for him.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
So it depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish and who needs to see that. Am I doing something just for the benefit of myself? Am I doing something for the benefit of other people? Do they need job results? How do I get that to them? If they need the job results, maybe whatever it is that you're doing, you save the results to that command and email it to them, or put it on a file share, or throw up a web page, or however, send up a SMS or smoke signals or singing telegram, whatever. Anything else? Questions?
No, I think.
What if your credentials aren't the username password type credential? Like in some cases, we actually have certificates that need to be passed along with the key invocation.
If you can't do it in Task Scheduler, you can't do it with the PowerShell Scheduled Job.
Okay, so it's whatever limitations are on Task Scheduler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, can you create a scheduled task like that right now? I've never done that.
I'm actually running things from my machine off to Amazon. And for that, I actually have a set of keys that have to go with it.
Yeah, that's different than the Windows Task Scheduler.
But I'm running it from the Windows Task Scheduler. I mean, it starts up every night, and it's making that connection, but that connection is kind of done in a different manner. So I'm just wondering if there's anything in there with the credentials that actually say, you can use whatever credential.
No, not unless there's something, so the command that you are running, so in Task Scheduler, if I go to look at the task that is running, if it's some command line tool, has parameters and whatnot, if it's something that you can customize or specify at that command line, sure, do whatever you want. And I'm betting that's what your tool is doing. It's running some command that internally, when it launches, is looking for certificates or whatever it needs, API keys, so that it will work. If you were to try that, say, on your machine, it would fail because he's not going to have the certificates or the keys, even if he has the same command. So that has nothing to do necessarily with the task scheduler, it has to do with the nature of the command that you are running. And the command itself is handling all of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I like scheduled jobs. They work for me. Maybe, I mean, I can put them to work, maybe you can put them to work, maybe you can find some ideas you could take. You've already set up a scheduled task, but maybe you want to set up as a scheduled job. So it's a little bit easier to track the results. Because I don't have to open up the GUI. I can just go and, I'm already in PowerShell, get job. And I can look at the job results and retrieve the job results.
I've been using them with Amazon Web Services because some of our projects, when they try to save some money, will have a setup where it has SQL Server Express Edition, maybe a small database, so they don't need all of the features that come with Enterprise. But SQL Server Express doesn't have an agent. There's no SQL Server agent service as part of the Express Edition. So I use jobs to do things like backups, and it works very well.
Yeah,
You're doing that on the server.
I am doing that, yes.
and that's fine. You perfectly can. Again, it's something that's going to run on the server. You can take advantage of the.
We're paying for the we're paying for the cloud, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Whether you do it through the task scheduler, all we get here with the scheduled jobs in PowerShell is just the ease of using something that you already know. Remember I talked for you guys who were here for the workshop today, PowerShell being the glue. So you can take this PowerShell knowledge that you have learned and apply it in lots of different ways. This is one of those ways that you can apply it. So you can kind of leverage PowerShell beyond your, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. job that you have. So that's my little spiel. My contact information, my blog, you're welcome to email me. I will share everything with you, and you can share it with the group. And my Twitter account, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. I think then we'll call this meeting to an end.
Do you want to raffle?
Yes,
I don't know how many people are.
We want to do that now? This is what I have. The original list. I just threw in.
All right, so we have numbers 1 through.
I don't want to include them historically by that.
No,
So, yes.
it's up to you. If you win, you can decide.
Okay. So we're going to be raffling off, or why don't I let you, since it's
All right,
yours.
so I brought a copy of the second edition of PowerShell in Depth that I'm going to kind of raffle off. I have a list, we're just going to have PowerShell do this here, just to prove there's nothing up my sleeve. So I got numbers 1 through 6 for people who are wanting this.
So PowerShell can generate a random number?
Yes. I'm going to, oh, so we do it this way. There are a couple ways you could do it. So I'm going to do 2 ways, and then we'll do the official drawing. So I could do one, using the range operator, 1 through 6, and just say, there's a command called getRandom, and it draws a random number. Or random element. It doesn't matter what it is that you pipe into it, it will give you a random object. So if I do get service, pipe to get random, just finds a random service. The other way you can use get random is I can say get random, minimum 1, max 6. Now that's a small set, so it's going to be the same. All right, so now,
Or is there a seed you have to give it?
oh yeah, there is a seed. I never used the seed. Let's look at help to get random. Something seed, set seed. Because it normally uses clock-based scenario. Use a system clock. Someone to give me a seed?
Go ahead. Give us
Yeah,
It has to be a number. Set seed, I've never used a seed.
4.
4. All right, so this is for the drawing.
You got it.
5.
Number 5 on the
Number
list.
5, Gregory Alfano.
Yay.
All right,
Thank you.
don't read it all at once.
I'll try not to.
If you put it underneath your pillow at night,
I heard that works.
you'll wake up with a crick in your neck.
So the one thing I'm noticing in set C, and he very well deserves it, but I'm just saying this, it results in a non-random behavior.
Each time it should generate.
Replicating. So the previous result was 5. Let's see if we can set the seed to something else. I just want to.
Huh.
I don't know.
I
mean, part of the problem is
you
that-
lots of time and say, pull the number out of time, and you just get the great big huge number, and that becomes your seed, and you do it each time you do it.
Part of the problem is our set is so small.
Yeah.
Right.
So, thank you.
All right, and thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you everybody out there online for logging in. Keep posted here on NJPowerShell. Follow us on Twitter, and we'll let you know when the next meeting's going to be. Thank you very much.